doing everything they can to convince Hoosiers this race is over. So they only report on the poll showing Donald up. You don't report on the poll showing me up.
Which poll showed you up?
There was a poll just 3 days ago here in Indiana that was done that showed me up by double digits. But listen, there is also a broader dynamic. There is a broader dynamic at work, which is network executives have made a decision to get behind Donald Trump. Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes at Fox News have turned Fox News into the Donald Trump network. 24/7. Now, Rupert Murdoch is used to picking world leaders in Australia and the United Kingdom, running tabloids. And we're seeing it here at home with the consequences for this nation. Media executives are trying to convince Hoosiers, trying to convince Americans the race is decided. You have no choice. You are stuck between Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, either one of which. The screenwriter says that he based the character Biff Tannen on Donald Trump. A caricature of a braggadocious, arrogant buffoon who builds giant casinos with giant pictures of him everywhere he looks. We are looking, potentially, at the Biff Tannen presidency. I don't think the people of America want that. I don't think we deserve that. I don't think Hoosiers want that.
Senator, these are some of the strongest words you've used against Donald Trump yet. You know I've been with you. I've heard you talk about him. Today feels different for you. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to say I sound like a broken record, and you're going to say that Donald Trump
well,
cannot.
If you sound like a broken record, someone else have a question?
But Senator, why
you've
not
asked
say
one already, Hallie. You've asked
will
already.
you support him as the nominee? I don't understand why you won't answer the question, Senator. If you say he's a liar, Jess, I'm sorry, but if you say he's a pathological liar, and you say that you can't.
Hallie, you've asked one already.
But why not definitively
go ahead,
say
Jessica.
Senator, when you talk about Midwestern values and the common sense and the good judgment, if Indiana Hoosiers don't pick you today, does that make you reconsider things in a different way than when the Northeast voted, and you could say that was Trump's neighbors voting?
Listen, there is no doubt this Indiana primary has national significance. The media is trying desperately to convince you it's over. I'll tell you, if Hoosiers come out today and vote, if you pick up the phone and you call your friends, you call your neighbors, if Hoosiers come out today and vote and say no, this is not who we are. This is not America. That will change the entire trajectory of this campaign, of this primary. It will pull us back from the cliff. Indiana can do it. Indiana can pull us back, but it takes Hoosiers showing up and voting today. And the country is looking to Indiana, is looking to the judgment of the good men and women of this state. Heidi and I and Carly, we have traveled this state showing Hoosiers respect, asking for their support, answering their questions. All the while, Donald Trump laughs at the people of this state. Laughs, bullies, attacks, insults. I don't believe that's America. And it is my hope, it is my prayer that Hoosiers will come out and vote today in record numbers to say to this country, this is not who we are. We are a people who believe in goodness. We are a people who believe in manners. We are a people who believe in generosity. We are a people who believe in honesty. We are a people who believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is America. That is the America I love. It's the America my father fled Cuba to come to. We're fighting for this nation. We're fighting for who we are, for the very soul and character of this nation. And it is quite literally in the hands of Hoosiers across the state.
What if they don't pick you? Senator, if they don't pick you, what does that say about Indiana?
Lots to digest from what we just saw. Republican strategist Susan Del Percio is with me. Susan, you have Ted Cruz now, as voting is going on right now in Indiana, watching potentially the end for him if Donald Trump is successful. According to the polls, many are saying this is all but done. How do you process what he just said of the front runner? I cannot. He is right now speaking, a lot going on with his campaign. Let's listen in.
and appreciate your putting a bright smile on it. Listen, it's up to the voters. It is up to the people of Indiana. It is up to the men of this state. I will say this. This morning, Donald Trump went on national television and attacked my father. Donald Trump alleges that my dad was involved in assassinating JFK. Now, let's be clear. This is nuts. This is not a reasonable position. This is just kooky. And while I'm at it, I guess I should go ahead and admit, yes, my dad killed JFK. He is secretly Elvis, and Jimmy Hoffa is buried in his backyard. You know, Donald's source for this is the National Enquirer. The National Enquirer is tabloid trash, but it's run by his good friend David Pecker, the CEO, who's endorsed Donald Trump. And so the National Enquirer has become his hit piece that he uses to smear anybody and everybody. And this is not the first time Donald Trump has used David Pecker's National Enquirer to go after my family. It was also the National Enquirer that went after my wife, Heidi, that just spread lies, blatant lies. But I guess Donald was dismayed because it was a couple of weeks ago the Enquirer wrote this idiotic story about JFK. And Donald was dismayed that the folks in the media weren't repeating this latest idiocy, so he figured he'd have to do it himself. He'd have to go on national television and accuse my dad of that. Listen, my father has been my hero my whole life. My dad was imprisoned and tortured in Cuba, and when he came to America, he had nothing. He had $100 in his underwear. He washed dishes making 50 cents an hour. You know, he's exactly the kind of person Donald Trump looks down on. I'm going to do something I haven't done for the entire campaign. For those of y'all who have traveled with me all across the country, I'm going to tell you what I really think. This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth. And in a pattern that I think is straight out of a psychology textbook, his response is to accuse everybody else of lying. He accuses everybody on that debate stage of lying. And it's simply a mindless yell. Whatever he does, he accuses everyone else of doing. The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. A narcissist at a level I don't think this country's ever seen. Donald Trump is such a narcissist that Barack Obama looks at him and goes, dude, what's your problem? Everything in Donald's world is about Donald. And he combines being a pathological liar. And I say pathological because I actually think Donald, if you hooked him up to a lie detector test, he could say one thing in the morning, one thing at noon, and one thing in the evening, all contradictory, and he'd pass the lie detector test each time. Whatever lie he's telling at that minute, he believes it. But the man is utterly amoral. Let me finish this, please. The man is utterly amoral. Morality does not exist for him. It's why he went after Heidi directly and smeared my wife, attacked her. Apparently, she's not pretty enough for Donald Trump. I may be biased, but I think if he's making that allegation, he's also legally blind. But Donald is a bully. Visited with fifth graders. Every one of us knew bullies in elementary school. Bullies don't come from strength. Bullies come from weakness. Bullies come from a deep, yawning cavern of insecurity. There is a reason Donald builds giant buildings and puts his name on them everywhere he goes. And I will say,
I want to ask you about the U.S.-led air assault against ISIS. There have been some successes from what we're learning. There have been some setbacks. In the end, you have talked. You made a quote, a famous quote recently. We ought to bomb them, meaning ISIS, back to the Stone Age. It does not appear that bombing alone is going to make that happen. That ISIS will not disappear with a U.S.-led air assault. That being the case, where do you see the role, if any, of U.S. military personnel?
Well, unfortunately, the approach of the Obama administration to ISIS has been fundamentally unserious. We have dropped a bomb here, a missile there, but it has been really a photo op foreign policy. What we need is a concentrated, directed military objective to take ISIS out. Now, what does that entail? Number one, it entails a far more vigorous air campaign than we're seeing. You know, we're dropping a fraction of the ordnance that we have in other campaigns such as Afghanistan.
But should it eventually, do you think it will involve U.S. troops?
Well, it involves U.S. troops now. There are over 1,500 that are on the ground right now.
And what I'm getting at, I guess, is if the air assault won't work, Senator, where do you stand on the idea of putting perhaps more U.S. personnel in there as advisors, or are those who scope out places for the air assaults to target?
Well, Candy, that's what I'm trying to answer by saying we have a tremendous asset on the ground right now, which is the Kurds. The Peshmerga have been strong allies of the U.S. They are effective fighters, and they desperately need weaponry and assistance. And for whatever reason, the Obama administration, number one, has been delaying aiding the Peshmerga, has been running it all through Baghdad instead of aiding them directly, has been blocking them from selling oil, which doesn't make sense either. And at the same time, the Obama administration keeps focusing on Syrian rebels, many of whom have far too close ties to radical Islamic terrorists for it to make any sense for us to be supporting them. The Kurds are allies, and they are boots on the ground. And when we work with them in concert, they're ready to fight on the front line along with serious air power. That's what we ought to be doing. And if it were a military objective to take ISIS out, I think that's what we would be doing.
Well, certainly the president has said it's his objective. Obviously, you disagree with the way he's going about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Senator Lee. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. The testimony we've heard today is powerful. Ms. Saldana, you are a Texan. You were a prosecutor in our state. You had a good reputation as a prosecutor. But you're serving in an administration that consistently refuses to follow the law. And we heard this morning the very real consequences of that. Now, in March, when you were testifying before the House, you were asked about sanctuary cities. Cities like San Francisco that defy federal law, and because of their defiance of federal law, Kate Steinle is no longer with us. She was murdered because of the refusal of local officials to recognize federal law. You were asked in that House hearing, should federal law compel state officials to comply with federal law? And your answer, and I want to quote verbatim, was thank you, amen, yes. Now, in my view, that was the former federal prosecutor speaking and giving an answer, and yet the next day, you issued a statement retracting what you'd said and saying, in fact, although you'd said amen, which is a pretty powerful statement from the heart, you didn't in fact mean that federal law should force local officials to comply with federal laws. I want to ask you, what political officials pressured you to change your statement?
Not a single one. This came from, the original statement came from my heart. The clarification came from our heart. And I don't mean to quibble with you, Senator. I respect you greatly. But I will say this. The question was not asked. The question was very specific. Would it be helpful for detainers to be mandatory? The law enforcement response there is clarity is always helpful. But I wanted to be sure that people were not reacting to that as an indictment of PEP or working with communities, and that's what I'm committed to do.
So let me make sure I understand your testimony correctly then. You said then it would be helpful, as in presumably helpful is good, is beneficial, is something you support. So are you saying then that ICE supports making it mandatory to comply with federal detainers?
No.
So it's helpful, but you don't support it?
Well, no, sir. I support what we have proposed and what we've been spending many hours on.
You just said it's, but you don't support it.
Clarity is always helpful, but cooperation and working with our state and local partners, something I've always done. I will continue to do it, and I'm committed to see it through with respect to these jurisdictions that haven't been working with us.
It is difficult to work in an administration where you're required to take a position where, although something would be, in your own words, helpful, you nonetheless don't support it. Let me shift to a different topic. In the year 2013, how many criminal illegal aliens did the Obama administration release?
In 2014, it was a little over 30,000.
How many murderers?
In that year, sir, I can't remember the number right now, but I know that we had the statistic that was said earlier, the 4-year period from 2010 to 2014, that there were 121 persons who committed crimes afterwards. But I can't provide you this exact number.
How many rapists?
I am not sure right now. I'd have to pull that number.
How many drunk drivers?
Same answer. I can certainly break that down for you. And in fact, I think we're working on that right now. It's been requested before.
Yesterday, how many murderers did the Obama administration release?
Now, Senator, I don't know the answer to that question, but I want the American people to understand our job and our mission, if I may. We don't release people willy-nilly. We release people pursuant to these statutes and regulations. There are only a limited number of crimes that we are required to detain people. It is mandatory. They're spelled out here very clearly, many of them related to drug distribution and conspiracies. With the rest of the people, as you know very well, Zabidas requires us to release some. I think that's a small percentage of the total. Also, the immigration courts have a 500,000 case backlog. They have the proceedings they go through. They will order release because many of these folks challenge their bond or their detention. But in the rest, and I think it's like 49% this past year, in the rest where ICE has discretion, where this statute has given us discretion, we have very well-trained, very well-experienced law enforcement officers who look at the entire case just like a magistrate judge or a federal judge does.
Ms. Saldana, I want to note that your testimony here, when I ask you how many criminals ICE released in 2013, you were off by a factor of 3. You said 30,000. The correct answer is 104,000. There were 68,000 criminals, criminal illegal aliens, that ICE declined to begin deportation proceedings against, despite the fact, as Senator Sessions observed, the federal law that you're holding up there says they shall be deported. The Obama administration refused to deport them. That's 68,000. In addition to that, there were 36,000 in deportation proceedings with criminal convictions that the Obama administration released. And I would note that among those were 193 murderers with homicide convictions, were 426 people with sexual assault convictions, were over 16,000 criminal illegal aliens with drunk driving convictions released by this administration because this administration refuses to follow the law.
Sir, those numbers, I'm looking straight at them. You asked me, I thought, about 2014. That is 30,558. And the good news is, at least that went down from 2013 when it was 36,007.
But you're omitting the 68,000 criminal illegal aliens that ICE did not begin deportation proceedings against at all. And you got to add both of those together. It's over 100,000.
And yes, sir, that's absolutely right. All done pursuant to this statute that the Congress has outlined.
Now, Ms. Saldana, you heard the testimony from the victims' families. I've introduced Kate's Law in the Senate, a mandatory minimum of 5 years in prison for anyone, 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 5 ye apprehended with an illegal reentry. Does ICE support Kate's law?
I sure would like to look at that. I haven't had a chance to. I'm not sure when it was introduced, if it has been.
It was introduced last week.
Okay. I have not had a chance to look at it. I'm sorry, Senator. But I'm certainly willing to look at any proposal along those lines and consider it and work with you if I find some objection to it.
Ms. Saldana, I will note in your opening statement here, you said after listening to the victim's family that you were so sorry for their losses. And yet the Obama administration keeps doing it. When I asked you how many murderers were released yesterday, you don't know. There is a reason the American people are upset. If President Obama had the courage of his convictions, he would come and look in the eyes of these men and women who've lost their sons, their daughters, their mothers, their sisters, their brothers, and the administration would stop releasing murderers and rapists. It is within your power to follow federal law. And this administration refuses to do so, and that is altogether unacceptable. Thank you.
Once again, we want to invite you to join the JTF Forum, the most exciting forum anywhere on the internet. There's a link below this video where you're able to join. It'll only take a minute. You don't have to be Jewish to join the JTF Forum. About half of our members are not Jewish. Hope to see you on the forum. Shalom.